Something remarkable is unfolding at the Cincinnati Open, and the biggest story isn't coming from the scoreboard. Inside the Lindner Family Tennis Center in Mason, Ohio, five-time Grand Slam champion and former world number 1 Maria Sharapova, one of the most accomplished players ever to compete with a racket in her hand, finds herself genuinely stunned, not by the level of tennis or the collection of major stars in the draw, but by Alex Eala, the sea of Philippine flags filling the stands, the thunderous chants of thousands of supporters calling her name, and a ticket demand so intense that tournament director Bob Moran was reportedly left speechless. Alex Eala has arrived in Cincinnati, and the scale of her impact is becoming impossible for the tennis world to ignore. Just weeks earlier, Toronto's 10,000-seat venue was transformed into a wall of Filipino pride, with packed stands, Philippine flags everywhere, and fans chanting for Alex so loudly that the atmosphere seemed to shake the building. It was a level of support rarely seen at a major tournament for a player outside the top 10, and now Cincinnati is experiencing that same phenomenon. The Filipino community, one of the largest diaspora populations in the United States, has mobilized in extraordinary numbers, with supporters driving from across Ohio, flying in from California, New York, and neighboring states, and even traveling across the country simply for the chance to be inside the venue when Eala steps onto the court. By the time she reached the tournament grounds, the walkways were already crowded with supporters holding banners and Philippine flags, children wearing replica kits, and adults visibly emotional at the sight of their rising star. The atmosphere felt like more than ordinary excitement, it felt like a homecoming, because for millions of Filipinos around the world, Eala represents exactly that. To them, she is not simply a tennis player, she represents resilience, ambition, and the belief that someone born in the Philippines can reach the biggest stages in global sport and prove that she belongs there. Once Eala's participation in Cincinnati was confirmed, the response became even more dramatic, with tickets disappearing at an astonishing pace. Bob Moran, who has watched countless marquee names pass through the tournament over the years, described the level of demand as unbelievable, making it clear that this was far more than casual curiosity. It was an entire community coming together behind one of its own. One analyst captured the phenomenon by saying that the Filipino population follows Eala and that she has become the biggest sports star in her country, male or female. Former world number 1 Andy Roddick even gave the movement a name, Ilamani, joking that the phenomenon is fun to watch, while pointing out that when people are organizing watch parties in arenas across a country just to watch a fourth-round match, something much bigger than tennis is taking place. Former British number 1 Greg Rusedski took the comparison even further, likening the intensity of Filipino support for Eala to the atmosphere surrounding Serena Williams during her era of dominance, a comparison that speaks not only to Eala's popularity but also to the cultural influence she is beginning to create. And then there is a deeply personal connection between Eala and Sharapova that makes this Cincinnati moment even more meaningful. Sharapova has been following Eala's rise for some time, and only weeks ago, after Eala produced a historic Wimbledon victory against defending champion Iga Swiatek, Sharapova left a simple but powerful response beneath Wimbledon's Instagram post, 2 words accompanied by a star. For Eala, that tiny gesture carried enormous significance because Sharapova had been her childhood idol, someone she had admired deeply while growing up, and knowing that a legend she once looked up to actually knew who she was felt like a victory in itself. But now Sharapova is no longer observing Eala's rise from afar, she is physically in Cincinnati, watching Philippine flags wave through the stands, hearing thousands of fans chant, and experiencing the Eala phenomenon firsthand. That reaction matters because Sharapova has witnessed nearly every form of tennis stardom imaginable. She has watched young talents become superstars, seen legends rise and eventually fade, and experienced enormous fame herself, so she understands exactly what genuine star power looks like. If even Sharapova can be caught off guard by the scale of Eala's following, it says something extraordinary about how quickly this movement has grown. For Eala, the moment feels almost perfectly full circle. The young girl who once watched Sharapova with admiration is now standing in front of that same legend, while the legend herself is witnessing the extraordinary impact that Eala has created. On the competitive side, Eala enters Cincinnati as the number 17 seed, marking the highest seeding of her career at a WTA 1000 tournament, and that position earns her a first-round bye, sending her directly into the second round. Her potential opening opponent is expected to come from the matchup between Romania's Elena Gabriela Ruse and Poland's Magdalena Frech, setting the stage for another major chapter in what has quickly become one of the most compelling stories in women's tennis. Both potential opponents are seasoned competitors who have already defeated Eala in the past, and the projected route only becomes more demanding after the opening round. If she advances, she could face Amanda Anisimova in the third round, followed by a possible fourth-round showdown with Linda Noskova, and should she survive that challenge, Jessica Pegula could be waiting for her in the quarterfinals. It is undeniably a difficult path, but none of that has convinced the thousands of Filipino supporters to leave, lower their flags, or soften their chants, because for them, Cincinnati is about something much bigger than the result of one tennis match. It is about being present for a potentially historic moment. One supporter captured that emotion perfectly, explaining that people are willing to spend their hard-earned money to attend because they genuinely love Eala, love her personality, love the way she plays, and believe she simply possesses that rare quality that some people naturally have, the kind of presence that makes others want to watch and support them. Take a step back, and the significance of Eala's rise becomes even clearer. Professional tennis has traditionally been heavily centered around North America and Europe, while players from Asia have historically struggled to establish themselves among the elite levels of the tour, and the Philippines had never produced a professional tennis star on this scale before Eala came along. She has changed that narrative by proudly representing where she comes from, speaking in her native language during interviews, embracing her Filipino heritage, and appearing on the covers of Vogue Philippines, Tatler, and virtually every major publication in her home country. What makes her rise even more powerful is that she has achieved this without trying to manufacture a particular public image. Instead, she has simply remained authentically and unapologetically herself. Her fellow players have noticed that quality as well. Danielle Collins praised how naturally comfortable Eala appears in her own identity and highlighted her genuine kindness, while Coco Gauff openly welcomed the impact she is having by saying that Eala is introducing an entirely new demographic to the WTA Tour. Jessica Pegula also recognized Eala's influence during her runner-up speech at the Washington Open, and Naomi Osaka has acknowledged the extraordinary passion of the Filipino supporters who continue following Eala wherever she competes. Andy Roddick perhaps summarized the larger significance most clearly when he argued that everyone involved in tennis should be rooting for Eala, because if she can introduce hundreds of millions of new people to the sport, that can only make tennis stronger. But Eala's journey did not begin under bright stadium lights or in front of massive crowds. She first picked up a tennis racket when she was just 4 years old. Then, in 2022, she made history by becoming the first Filipino player ever to win a junior Grand Slam title, before stunning the tennis world in March 2025 with an extraordinary run to the Miami Open semifinals, where she defeated 3 Grand Slam champions along the way, including Iga Swiatek. In 2026, she created another historic milestone by becoming the first Filipina to win a Grand Slam singles main draw match at the US Open, and then came the breakthrough that elevated her profile even further, her first WTA Tour Singles Championship in Washington, D.C., a victory that unleashed the full force of the Eala frenzy. Now that phenomenon has followed her to Cincinnati. The scale of her influence has already become measurable, with tournament organizers in Toronto reporting that Eala alone generated more than 5,000 ticket sales, a remarkable figure for a single player. She is filling stadiums, bringing communities together, attracting audiences who may never have followed tennis before, and giving those fans a new reason to care deeply about the sport. That is why Sharapova's reaction to Eala in Cincinnati represents much more than a famous champion being impressed by another player. It reflects just how dramatically Eala's journey has evolved and hints at how much greater her future could become. The young girl who once admired Sharapova from afar is now the athlete being watched with admiration by a legend herself. That moment is bigger than coincidence and bigger than luck. It is the Eala effect in full force. Cincinnati is simply the next chapter in a remarkable journey, and if the energy surrounding her is any indication, this story is nowhere near its ending. For more tennis coverage, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because you will not want to miss what happens next.